following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being.
Hello and welcome. You're watching News 9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Let's get you all the top national and international stories that we're tracking at this hour. The war between Israel and Hamas has now entered its 69th day. Let's get you a complete lowdown. Well, 10 Israeli soldiers have been killed in the worst combat losses for Israel since late October. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to continue the fight until the end, despite the setbacks and the international pressure. No one determines for us what to do. That's what Israel's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, has said as international pressure on Israel mounts. Meanwhile, Israel has bombed several locations across the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has met with the Saudi Crown Prince to discuss the Gaza crisis. Also, the U.S. has imposed new sanctions on several Hamas officials. The Israeli army has released fresh footage depicting the ground offensive during which 10 soldiers were killed in an ambush. This was the worst combat loss for Israel in more than a month. Body camera videos showed what appeared to be Israeli troops engaged in ground combat. These are visuals of the fighting in Shujaa district of Gaza City in the north. The troops were ambushed while attempting to rescue another group of soldiers who had attacked fighters in a building, according to the Israeli Defense Forces.
The Israeli military on Wednesday released this footage purporting to show fierce house-to-house battles with Hamas militants in the shell-shocked Shujaa district of Gaza City. And it showcases how, despite Israel's overwhelming superiority in the air, in tanks, and with artillery, Palestinian resistance remains lethal. Underscoring that reality, Israel said on Wednesday 10 of its soldiers were killed in an ambush in the prior 24 hours in an operation to rescue another group of soldiers that came under fire. Among those killed were Lieutenant Colonel Tomer Grinberg, who was buried on Wednesday. It was the worst one-day loss since 15 soldiers were killed on October 31st. Fighting has only intensified amid the rubble in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, where Israel had previously claimed its military objectives had been largely met. Israel's devastating assault on Gaza has killed more than 18,000 Palestinians, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, including thousands of young children. This body was recovered from the rubble of an airstrike in Rafah. This man cries, "These are children. Children. Do they kill anyone other than children?" The death toll has sparked an international outcry. The United Nations General Assembly this week passed a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire. Israel's foreign minister on Wednesday said it would wage war on Hamas with or without international support after militants launched a surprise attack on October 7th, rampaging through Israeli communities, killing 1,200 people and taking hundreds of hostages. Gazans fleeing destruction have crowded into shelters in the south, overwhelming the health system already strained by a lack of fuel and medicine. Lynn Hastings is the United Nations humanitarian coordinator for the occupied Palestinian territories.
We all know that the healthcare system is or has collapsed. We've got a textbook formula for epidemics and a public health disaster. This is in part, of course, because the shelters have long ago exceeded their full capacity, with people lining up for hours just to get to a toilet, one toilet available for hundreds of people. You can imagine what the sanitation conditions are like as a result.
White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan plans to travel to Israel on Thursday and Friday to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu amid U.S. efforts to pressure Israel to dial back what President Joe Biden has called the, quote, indiscriminate bombing of Gaza.
Israelis have been protesting in Tel Aviv, demanding the release of the remaining hostages who are still in Hamas's captivity. Thousands of Israelis have been rallying against their own government's handling of the Hamas hostage crisis. Many protesters have called for Prime Minister Netanyahu's resignation.
This dance is a reminder that nearly 140 hostages are still believed to be held in Gaza. Among them is 26-year-old Noah Argamani, whose terminally ill mother recently pleaded to see her daughter one last time.
Each day that is passing, they suffer more and more.
We are in what has become known as Hostages Square. Located in central Tel Aviv, it's become the place people gather to demand the return of those taken during the October 7th Hamas terror attacks. Many here, including Shimrit Schiffer, believe this is what their government needs to do to meet that demand.
To fight them hard, Hamas, because that's the way they understand. No other way. They understand the way of power. And if that's the way to get our people back, so that's the way I expect my government to act.
Nearby, hundreds of protesters called for that same government to be replaced. Here, it's not just hostages that need to be freed, but the whole state, as this sign reads.
They're shouting slogans like impeachment now, and the government has blood on its hands. After 16 years in power, the people here no longer believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu is the right person to lead the country, especially in this moment.
Netanyahu needs to say, it was my responsibility, I was in charge, and I'm going to resign. If he says so, it can perhaps live a few more months until the end of the war.
Among the people out on the streets today, there's also mounting anger at the way the Netanyahu government is handling the conflict with Hamas.
I think the real argument in Israel right now is between people who see themselves living here in peace and are willing to make the sacrifice to get there, and the people who don't, the people who feel, if you feel content living on the sword, that's how we say it in Hebrew, like if you feel content living in war, I have nothing in common with you. And there are too many people in the government who feel that way.
Netanyahu, of course, at first thinks about his interest. We call to ceasefire, because only in ceasefire we can talk and make a good deal to bring all of the hostages home. All the time war continue, it's no deal.
The protesters continued their march through the streets of Tel Aviv until they reached Hostages Square. They may have differing opinions on Israel's leadership, but they are one in their demand: bring the hostages home. Among those already here is 85-year-old Yocheved Lifshitz, a former hostage, one of the first to be released from Gaza. A living, walking sign of hope for the many still waiting for their loved ones to return.
Israeli citizens do not favor the army backing off from its unrelenting offensive to crush Hamas in Gaza. Recent polls, including one by the Tel Aviv University, show that barely 10% of Israelis believe the army is using too much firepower. Here's a report.
Israelis are watching a rising number of their soldiers killed fighting in Gaza. We will free Palestine! And growing international condemnation over the Palestinian death toll. But their leaders remain resolute in their commitment to destroy the Hamas Islamist group and retrieve an estimated 100 Israeli hostages. Footage released by the Israeli government showed Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu telling soldiers he was committed to annihilating Hamas, saying, quote, "I say this in the face of great pain, but also in the face of international pressures. Nothing will stop us. We will go to the end, to the victory, no less than that." And it's a message that seems to resonate with many Israelis.
Israel is paying an incredibly high price with all these young, precious soldiers being killed.
Saadia Gopstein is an attorney in Jerusalem.
What choice do we have? This is a fight for our survival.
Many Israelis acknowledge the devastating toll of the campaign on Palestinian civilians living in Gaza.
I think the civilian death toll, it's horrendous. It's awful. It's terrible. But again, we didn't start this.
However, they remain committed to victory.
It's awful. It's awful that there's so many civilian casualties, and if we could, we're doing our very best to try and avoid them. But this is war, and that's what happens in war.
Israel's invasion of Gaza has killed more than 18,000 Palestinians. It came in retaliation after Hamas fighters assaulted Israeli communities on October 7th, killing 1,200 and taking hundreds more captive. This week's United Nations resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire has been rejected by Israel. That sentiment seems to span both the right and the left of the political spectrum among Israeli Jews. Tamar Herman is a political science professor at the Israel Democracy Institute.
Indeed, the sense of self-righteousness in a way that we are entitled to do everything in order to serve our security makes Israelis, even on the left, less sensitive to what is happening to the citizens in Gaza.
Along with capturing or killing the Hamas commanders who planned the October 7th rampage, a goal of Israel's war is to bring back hostages grabbed by the militants and taken to Gaza.
Right now, we didn't achieve neither the first nor the second. And therefore, most of the people are ready to continue until the point where at least one of the major aims is achieved.
In a recent wartime opinion poll amongst Palestinians, support for Hamas has increased even within the war-torn Gaza Strip. Additionally, there's widespread rejection of Western-backed President Mahmoud Abbas, with almost 90% of the respondents strongly suggesting that he must resign. The results provided by a Palestinian pollster indicate potential challenges for Israel's stated objective of dismantling Hamas's military and governing capacities. During a news briefing, the White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby said the United States sees hope for normalization of ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Kirby said the Biden administration is actively working to define the parameters and conditions for a two-state solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict. However, he said the recent Hamas attacks in Israel have disrupted this opportunity.
Our team was working very hard on normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which was going to be, we still think there's hope here, to be a stepping stone to get closer to a two-state solution. So we were very actively engaged in trying to set the parameters and set the conditions for a two-state solution going forward. Now, obviously, the events of October 7th have somewhat derailed that opportunity. Everybody's focused rightly on what's going on in Gaza, but that doesn't mean we're giving up on that.
All right, time for us to take a quick break. In the meantime, take a look at this. Nearly 40 years ago, Indian diplomat Ravinder Mhatre was killed in cold blood in the UK. Who was the man who pulled the trigger? Here's a snippet.
It was my 14th birthday.
On birthday, daughter waits
for missing father. He was carrying a cake for his daughter.
49-year-old Birmingham-based
Indian diplomat vanishes.
He was grabbed and bundled into a car by 4 assailants.
KLA claims responsibility
Demands
for Kashmiri separatists.
Maqbool Bhatt's release.
गोली मारो और फेंक दो.
And within 3 days, they shot him dead.
Abducted diplomat.
Found murdered in Leicestershire.
I said, who ordered to kill him? To me, he said, yes, I ordered it. And he never came home.
This and more streaming now on the world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus. Download now.
In a historic accord at the COP28 Summit in Dubai, almost 200 nations have pledged to move away from fossil fuels. This groundbreaking agreement marks a pivotal departure from oil dependence, addressing imminent climate threats. Here's a complete report.
I must say that you did it. You delivered.
After 2 weeks of hard-fought debate, nations struck a historic deal at COP28 in Dubai. The pact aims to transition the global economy away from fossil fuels. Here are some key takeaways. This is the first time the world has expressed a unified desire to eventually end the use of fossil fuels. The provision calls for, quote, transitioning away from fossil fuels in energy systems in a just, orderly, and equitable manner, with the goal of achieving net zero by 2050. While it is sending a resounding signal to international markets, it will not immediately destroy oil consumption or shrink prices. However, incremental policy moves and shifting investment trends over time could ensure a longer-term transformation of the energy economy. The pact also had rewards for oil producers. There's a clear acknowledgement that technologies like carbon capture can reduce the climate impact of oil, natural gas, and coal. Boosting such technologies was highlighted in a list of actions that countries should take to fight climate change. A source familiar with Saudi thinking said the kingdom could accept the deal because it provides a menu for every country to follow its own pathway. Carbon capture remains very expensive in certain applications. It's also never been proven at the vast global scale needed to have a significant impact. The pact is missing any additional financing to help developing nations transition away from fossil fuels. Money to help poor, climate-vulnerable countries adapt to the impacts of climate change was also lacking. However, there was a victory at the start of the summit for poor nations hit by climate disaster when delegates adopted a new fund to help them cope with loss and damages. The US, European Union, and scores of other countries said the deal maintained a chance of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial average. But getting there will be tough. It would require cutting emissions nearly in half in just 6 years, and making it to net zero by 2050. The draft calls for countries to do so, but some, like the Alliance of Small Island States, questioned whether it will happen.
The U.S. House of Representatives voted on Wednesday to formally authorize its ongoing impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden as Republicans unite behind the effort, even though they have yet to find any evidence of wrongdoing by the president.
On this vote, the yeas are 221 and the nays are 212. The resolution is adopted.
The Republican-controlled House of Representatives voted Wednesday to authorize an impeachment inquiry into Democratic President Joe Biden after months of investigation that has so far failed to uncover evidence of wrongdoing by the president. Republicans have said without proof that Biden improperly traded access while he served as vice president in President Barack Obama's administration. The White House says they have no basis for an impeachment inquiry. Among the accusations from Republicans is that the president profited from his son Hunter Biden's business dealings while serving as vice president. Reuters correspondent Andy Sullivan is covering the story.
The Republicans have dug up some evidence that Hunter did trade on this perception that he could provide a pipeline to his powerful father. But they have not provided any evidence so far that Biden himself profited. They've hinted that they think he might have profited from his son's business dealings, but they haven't turned up any evidence.
Republicans have pointed to an FBI document from 2020 in which an informant claims the head of Burisma, a Ukrainian energy firm that included Hunter Biden on its board of directors, said, quote, it cost $5 million to pay one Biden and $5 million to another Biden. According to Representative Jamie Raskin, the top Democrat on the Oversight Committee, the FBI dropped the matter after determining there was no evidence to back it up. Burisma is at the center of another allegation from Republicans who have said Biden pressured Ukraine to remove its top prosecutor to protect Burisma and Hunter Biden from a possible corruption investigation.
The defense is that Biden was calling for this guy's removal as the official policy of the United States government. He was acting on behalf of the Obama administration. The Obama administration had determined this guy's bad news. We want him out of there. Biden was the messenger that delivered that. Now, certainly, you could see there might be potential for a conflict of interest here. Here's Biden pressuring a country to remove its top investigator while his son is involved with a very prominent company there. But again, they haven't turned up any evidence of a real quid pro quo.
Also, Republicans have raised questions about the prosecution of Hunter Biden, who has pleaded not guilty to federal charges that he lied about his drug use while buying a handgun, and has been charged separately with tax evasion.
Now, Republicans are saying, have they soft-pedaled this investigation? Did the Justice Department try to block this prosecutor? They've turned up a few internal government whistleblowers who said that, they didn't go as hard on this as they could. Now, the prosecutor, who again was appointed by President Trump, has said he hasn't encountered any interference. He's been able to do his work, and he's clearly brought these charges.
Hunter Biden's lawyer said Hunter has repaid his taxes in full and would not be facing charges if he was not the president's son.
After more than 10 weeks, 40 witnesses in bursts of courtroom fireworks testimony wrapped up on Wednesday in former President Donald Trump's civil $250 million business fraud trial, but a verdict is at least a month away. The verdict will decide how much the Trumps and their company must pay in disgorgement and the fate of their business in New York. The closing agreements are scheduled for the 11th of January. The case threatens to disrupt the 2024 Republican frontrunner's real estate empire and even stop him from doing business in his native state. Even though testimony concluded on Wednesday, a gag order barring Trump from making comments about the judge's staff is still in place. Azerbaijan and Armenia exchanged prisoners of war at their border, a positive step in normalizing the long-standing conflict. Azerbaijan released 32 Armenians and Armenia returned 2 soldiers held since April. Discussions on troop withdrawal from the shared border are ongoing.
Azerbaijan and Armenia traded prisoners of war at their border on Wednesday. It signals a step towards the normalisation of a decades-old conflict between the two countries. Azerbaijan set 32 Armenians free, while Armenia handed back 2 soldiers they've held since April. Russia's TASS news agency also reported on Wednesday that the countries were discussing withdrawing troops from their shared border, though no decision had been taken. The South Caucasus neighbours have fought 2 wars in the past 30 years over Nagorno-Karabakh, a mountainous area that is part of Azerbaijan, but where ethnic Armenians had established de facto independence in the 1990s. Azerbaijan recaptured Karabakh in a lightning offensive in September, prompting most of its 120,000 ethnic Armenians to flee to Armenia. Upon announcing the prisoner release last week, the 2 sides said they reconfirmed their intention to normalise relations and reach a peace treaty. It's welcome news for the United States and European Union. Both have tried to persuade Azerbaijan and Armenia to settle outstanding issues, including the demarcation of their borders. Armenia and Azerbaijan were both part of the Soviet Union, which collapsed in 1991. Russia regards itself as the security guarantor in the region, but its influence has declined in recent years due to the war in Ukraine.
In Poland, the youth are pinning high hopes on the new Donald Tusk government. After 8 years of a conservative Polish government, young voters are hoping that the centre-left coalition will revive democracy in the country. They expect the Tusk government to strengthen ties with the European Union and aspire reforms in a variety of areas.
Monika Horno-Cieślak is 34 years old and has become the new ombudswoman for children's rights in Poland. After 8 years of rule by a conservative government, a group of centre-left parties has come together to form a new government in Poland. The new coalition aims to bring Poland closer to the European values, and Monika wants to be part of this change.
I'm glad that we've reached a new openness, that we can do a lot, that we have the opportunity to represent the voice of young people who showed us their voice at the parliamentary elections. Because let us remember that young people in Poland went to the polls in great numbers, and I hope that their voice will continue to be heard.
The new parliamentary majority in Poland stands proof that the votes of the youth count. The revival of the good relations with Brussels also plays a key role for the new government. Over recent years, Michal Wawrikowicz, lawyer and co-founder of the Free Courts Initiative, condemned the Conservative Law and Justice government's violations of the rule of law. Poland has been fined by the European Union over its controversial judicial reforms.
These courts confirmed that many areas of Polish judiciary and Polish rule of law was distracted by the government. So right now we are at the moment where the new government has an obligation to implement all of these judgments of the European courts and has to repair the rule of law in Poland, has to back the independence of judiciary and impartiality of Polish courts.
Over 11 million Poles voted for the three parties which make up the new coalition government. These voters are now hoping for reforms in a variety of areas. Monika Horno-Cieślak is aware of people's huge expectations. In addition to improving children's rights, climate protection and forging a tight cooperation with the European Union are her main goals.
As far as the relations with the EU are concerned, thinking in terms of protecting the rights of young people, it is important to deal with the climate issue, because here in Poland we have climate strikes organized by the youth. It is important to work out good solutions in this area, because I know that young people are very much counting on a dialogue with the EU and also on a dialogue with the Polish government.
The new Polish government now faces the huge task of not disappointing the majority of Poles who voted for them. One thing is for sure, Poland is facing major changes.
Time for a quick break here on the show, but there's more on the other side. Stay with us.
With all this gear, you must be wondering if I'm climbing a mountain. Well, let me give you a wider look of this place. This is Asia's largest mountain of shame.
A mountain of waste, almost the height of the Qutub Minar.
When you enter capital cities of some of the biggest countries in the world, you don't have three garbage mountains waiting to welcome you, depending on whichever side of the city you enter from.
The thing is that a lot of times we talk about landfills only when there's a fire at the landfill. You need to understand that a landfill is at fire almost throughout the year. It's only when the firefighters are not able to douse the fire is when it actually catches the nation's attention, the city's attention, or media attention.
The towering landfills worsen one of Delhi's biggest problems: pollution.
यहाँ पर आप रात को आओ, दिन में आओ, आप 1 घंटे बैठ नहीं सकते बाहर। इतनी धूल, प्रदूषण, महक, आप खाना भी नहीं खा सकते बाहर बैठ के।
Life around the landfill is a curse.
हमारे घर में जो बड़े हैं, उन्हें अस्थमा के वो पेशेंट है। आए दिन उनको नेबुलाइजर लगाना पड़ता है।
डॉक्टर ने मुझे ये चीज बोला कि यहाँ का एरिया छोड़ के कहीं और चाहिए।
Delhi's garbage mountains are now a fetid symbol of the national capital's trash problem. The question is, who is to be blamed? Watch Delhi's Garbage Mountains. Streaming on News 9 Plus for the Genflix.
Currently, the industry is facing a lot of challenges as far as demand is concerned. Basically, the US markets has slowed down because of high inflation.
So obviously, diamonds being a dream product, something which doesn't have a utility value or is seen as a luxury. So that obviously goes off your shopping list. That's the first item that will go off your shopping list, especially in recessionary trends.
That lab-grown diamonds are not mined, and they do away with the entire mining. So they save up on all the environmental damage that is associated with mining, and of course, the mining cost, which is why they're even more affordable.
People that is impacted by all these recessions are the artisans, are the people who work in this industry, right? But I think lab-grown diamond has allowed them to actually use their skills in the same product.
This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus. Download now.
Welcome back. In a significant order in the Krishna Janmabhoomi Shahi Eidgah Mosque dispute case, the Allahabad High Court has allowed a plea seeking the appointment of a court commissioner to inspect the Eidgah Mosque. The name of the survey commissioner and the time frame during which the survey will have to be completed will be determined on the 18th of December. The bench, comprising Justice Mayank Kumar Jain, passed the order on an application filed by the deity named Bhagwan Shri Krishna Virajman and 7 others. The petition was led by advocates Hari Shankar Jain and Vishnu Shankar Jain. The application moved in the High Court claims that the Lord Shri Krishna's birthplace lies beneath the Shahi Eidgah Mosque. The court, for now, has given its go-ahead for a survey here.
11 application should be decided first. An advocate commission should not be decided. That argument has been rejected. The court has in principle agreed with our demand that advocate commissioner must be issued. Who will be the advocate commissioner, whether it will be a 3-member panel, what will be the timing of advocate commissioner, what will be the modalities, all these things will be decided on 18 December. My demand was that in this Shahi Eidgah Masjid there are a lot of signs and symbols of Hindu temple, and to know the actual factual position, an advocate commissioner panel is required, and therefore the Honorable Court has accepted my application, allowed my application, and this order has been passed. It's a very big, important landmark judgment by the Honorable Allahabad High Court.
In other news, the Thai police seized more than 15 million pills and other illegal substances worth $8.15 million in what authorities said was one of the largest drug busts this year. The UN has said in a report earlier this year the trafficking of synthetic drugs in East and Southeast Asia is surging, with high volumes continuing to be produced from the Golden Triangle region, where the borders of Myanmar, Thailand and Laos meet, and smuggling routines are expanding. 4 people have been arrested in connection with this seizure. Four Japanese ministers have stepped down amid a corruption scandal, adding to Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's challenges. The scandal involves alleged kickbacks of 500 million yen, that's $3.4 million, within the long-standing ruling party, the Liberal Democratic Party, which has governed Japan's 3rd largest economy for decades. The Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary had this to say.
Many issues have been raised currently regarding political funds, and as a result, the people's trust in the government wavers. As various issues have also been made about my own political fundraising report, I decided to resign today from my position as Chief Cabinet Secretary to avoid delay in policy process, and I've submitted my resignation to Prime Minister Kishida. In addition to that, today I received resignation letters from Minister of Internal Affairs and Communications Suzuki, Minister of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries Miyashita, Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry, Nishimura, and Special Advisor to the Prime Minister, Ueno, and submitted them to the Prime Minister.
Tesla is recalling nearly all vehicles sold in the US, more than 2 million, to update software and fix a defective system that's supposed to ensure drivers are paying attention when using the autopilot mode. Here's this report.
Tesla is recalling just over 2 million vehicles in the United States. It's to install new safeguards for vehicles carrying its autopilot advanced driver assistance system. The electric vehicle giant made the move after a safety regulator said the system was open to foreseeable misuse. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, has investigated Tesla for more than 2 years. It wanted to know whether its vehicles adequately ensure drivers pay attention when using the driver assistance system. Tesla said in the recall filing that autopilot's software system controls may not be sufficient to prevent driver misuse and could increase the risk of a crash. Tesla's autopilot is intended to enable cars to steer, accelerate and brake automatically within their lane. Enhanced autopilot can assist in changing lanes on highways but does not make them autonomous. Tesla said it did not agree with the regulator's analysis but added it would deploy an over-the-air software update. It said this will incorporate additional controls and alerts to those already existing on affected vehicles. The aim is to encourage the driver to stick to their continuous driving responsibility whenever auto steer is engaged. The company did not respond to a question on whether the recall would be performed outside the US. NHTSA opened a probe in 2021 into autopilot after identifying more than a dozen crashes in which Tesla vehicles hit stationary emergency vehicles. Its investigation into autopilot will remain open as it monitors Tesla's remedies.
Scientists in Switzerland are studying if humans can control an additional robotic arm without affecting other tasks. The research aims to understand the nervous system and potentially aid applications like assistive devices for people with disabilities or stroke rehabilitation. Here's the story.
Scientists in Switzerland are testing whether humans can control an extra robotic arm without impacting our ability to do other things at the same time. Silvestro Macera is a professor and neuroengineer at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. The research was published in the peer-reviewed journal Science Robotics.
The main motivation is to understand the nervous system. Because if you challenge the brain to do something which is completely new, you will understand whether the brain is able to do that and how you can facilitate this learning. And then you can transfer this also to other applications, in particular, for example, for assistive devices with people with disability, rehabilitation after stroke, and these kind of things.
The researchers devised a system where someone wearing virtual reality goggles sees 3 arms, with the extra limb looking a little different to limit natural association. Volunteers held onto an exoskeleton which controlled the virtual left and right arms, while movement detected by a belt around their waist measured their breathing and controlled the middle arm. Giulia Dominigiani is a PhD student.
In particular, we use this environment to test our gaze respiration-based control interface. And as a first step, we decided to assess its actual feasibility for effective augmentation, so assessing the
arm strap to the user's chest that extends in and out with the diaphragm.
What was extremely interesting to see was that both trained participants and naive participants performed similarly, again showing the intuitiveness of our control interface.
Though it wasn't published in the study, senior scientist Sulaiman Shakur says the team also discovered that people could be trained to control a computer mouse with the muscles we don't really use anymore.
So these muscles that we have in our body, but through evolution we have lost their functionality. We have found that through a few days of training, people could use these auricular muscles, which are this muscle we have behind the ears, to control this extra limb while still using their natural arms and still speaking and looking around.
The study is part of a Swiss National Science Foundation project to develop a wearable robotic arm to assist in daily tasks or to help in search and rescue.
From the European Union becoming the first major power to regulate AI, and Alphabet's Gemini boosting shares aiming to compete with ChatGPT, to Elon Musk's AI introducing the Grok chatbot as an alternative to big tech's censored products, to McDonald's adopting AI to make better burgers. Here are the biggest artificial intelligence stories of the week.
From a big deal in Brussels to how McDonald's thinks bots can help it make better burgers. This is Generation AI. After days of haggling, the EU reached a deal on how to regulate AI, including how governments use the technology. That makes the bloc the first major world power to move towards enacting rules on the tech. European Commissioner Thierry Breton thinks others will follow Europe's lead.
Europe has positioned itself as a pioneer, understanding the importance of its role as a global standard setter.
Alphabet shares soared after it launched Gemini, a new AI model that could help it close the gap with ChatGPT. The Google parent firm was long considered a leader in the sector, but lost that title when OpenAI's chatbot took the tech landscape by storm. Elon Musk's xAI has started rolling out its new Grok chatbot to some subscribers on X, his social network. The billionaire wants it to be an alternative to rival products made by big tech, which he says are riddled with censorship. McDonald's is using AI to keep a closer eye on its restaurants. The burger chain has partnered with Google Cloud to deploy the tech. It hopes AI will let it see what's going on in each store and help find cost savings. And chip giant AMD says the market for its AI processors will grow to $45 billion this year, with more to come. It says the market for such silicon could be close to 10 times that amount by 2027. The forecast came as AMD launched new chips meant to help it catch market leader NVIDIA.
All right, following a one-year break, Russian President Vladimir Putin is back with his annual end-of-the-year press conference. This time, he is taking direct line call in for questions. He's also going to be facing questions from the Western media for the first time since the invasion of Ukraine. Let's listen in. So that highly anticipated press conference by Russian President Vladimir Putin is expected to get underway any minute now. As we said, this is the first of its kind press conference in some ways. This is the first time that Putin will take questions from the Western media since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February last year. Putin has also decided to take direct questions from some Russian citizens who are expected to call during this press conference. It's a much anticipated press conference. It was cancelled last year given that there was growing international pressure on Putin following his invasion of Ukraine, but this otherwise has been a regular feature for the Russian president, an annual end of the year press conference that he has been holding for several years now. Of course, the journalists, especially those from Western media, will certainly have plenty of questions for the Russian president about his Ukraine war.
We are prepared to start in about 2 minutes. We will be taking stock of the year with President Vladimir Putin. You know that this is a blended format. I'd like to remind you of that. that this is a blended press conference and a hotline with the president. As for a conversation of the president with you, with the media, will be moderated by me, your humble servant, or by the president himself, as he often does. As for the conversation of the president in the hotline and him responding to the calls and appeals of the citizens will be moderated by my colleagues and friends, Yekaterina Berezovskaya and Pavel Zarubin. I'd like to ask you, when you're asking your question here, please stand up. You'll be given the mic. Please say who you are, what media you're representing, and the microphone will be held by my colleagues who are helping us out today. I'd be very thankful if you put your mobile phones on silent. Thank you. You have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Peskov. We've been receiving questions for 2 weeks straight. Indeed, they came in from all over the country, a tremendous amount of calls. All of Russia is speaking directly, honestly, and frankly. This tremendous number of calls and appeals made us, together with Yekaterina, look at thousands of pages of your questions. We looked through tons of videos. Indeed, the past 2 weeks seem to be the largest poll all over Russia. We felt not only as journalists together with Pavel, but also as sociologists. It is natural that it's impossible to answer these millions of questions, all of them. But there are common topics. What is the main topic? The main one is special military operation. Our military servicemen are writing to us. All things considered, well, this year, right at the very stage of gathering all the questions, we engaged the National People's Front, so there is no doubt that all of the calls and appeals will be processed and will not remain unanswered. The activists of NPF are prepared to do that. However, the most relevant and interesting questions will be voiced today. Yesterday, a question came in about the salary not being paid, and salary was paid actually that very day in the evening. There are plenty of questions that are yet unsolved, and the thing is that we're living in a world that's completely different, and people are worried not only about social matters. It is now, before the new year, it's time to take stock of the year. December is traditionally filled with many events. Last week, Mr. President, you've announced your decision to run for president. In this, against this background, what kind of attacks do you have abroad and domestically? What are the main questions for you? Well, I spoke about that many times, but it bears repeating now. For such a country as Russia, the very existence of our country without sovereignty is impossible. It will simply not exist, at least in the state that it exists now and existed for thousands of years. So the main thing is to strengthen the sovereignty. However, it's a very broad term. External sovereignty, that means strengthening our military power and security and safety on our borders. Strengthening our social sovereignty, public sovereignty. That means absolute observation of the rights and freedoms of our citizens, of strengthening our political system, parliamentarism, and finally, that is providing security and sovereignty in economic and technological sphere. Well, I don't think that in responding to this question, I don't need to cover all of these matters, but I'm quite positive that the audience that we have here and the rest of the country is fully aware that Russia cannot exist without it. Financial, economic, and technological sovereignty is the future of any country, including Russia. So if we talk in concepts, these are the main dimensions. Let's turn to economy. Many in the world have been surprised that the Russian economy did not collapse under the burden of the so-called pressure, sanctions, pressure from our former so-called partners. But it's apparent that they have the goal to push Russia to the limit and to make it buckle. So what kind of resilience does the Russian economy have? It's resilient enough not to only feel quite confident, but to move forward. And this resilience, well, we've discussed it many times as well, but I'll repeat myself. That is ensured by several components. The first one, and the most important one, is the tremendous consolidation of the Russian society. The second thing is sustainability of financial and economic system of the country. It came as a surprise to our so-called partners, and honestly to many of us as well, that over the past decades, Russia has gained this resilience and sustainability in finance and economy. And the third component, naturally, is greater capacity of our forces, security forces and the army. And if we talk about the economic indicators, specific indicators, what can we be proud of? Well, as per usual, I brought a table over. There is nothing special that we don't know, but I think that yesterday, Finance Minister voiced several indicators yesterday. The main indicator is growth of GDP of our economy at the end of the year is expected at 3.5%. That is a good indicator. That means that we bounced back from the dip last year. I think we stood at it at 2.1%. If this year we gained 3.5%, that means we bounced back and made quite a significant step forward. Unfortunately, we have inflation growth. That is so, and we expect 7.5% at the end of the year, maybe even higher, reaching almost 8%. The central bank and the government are taking all the necessary measures, and we can discuss that later. We can talk about the increase in interest rates and so on, other measures that the central bank and the government are undertaking, and we hope that we can go back to the targeted level of inflation. Industrial production is growing confidently, 3.6%, but what's especially makes us happy, manufacturing 7.5%. That is year-on-year growth. This is an unexpectedly high rate. And what makes us especially positive is 10% growth investment into main capital, fixed capital. That means that today we have apparent growth in GDP and industry, plus 10% in fixed capital investments. That means that midterm we have ensured our sustainable growth. There will be new jobs created, expansion of industry, and so on. As for unemployment, I'll speak about that later. The profit stands at 24% of the industry, let alone banks. They are going to earn almost 3 trillion rubles, even more. Of course, I know that in this audience and from around the country that, yes, the banks are doing fine. They're going through fat years. But those people who are storing their money in Russian banks, that's good news for them. The sustainability of the Russian banking and financial system. Now on to real wages. It's going to increase by about 8% year on year without inflation.
Well, this will not be a universal picture across the country, but more or less these are specific, precise statistics, and the real disposable incomes of our people will also be growing. There are more components therein, but it's going to be about 5% growth. The unemployment rates. Recently, we were proud of record low levels of 3% of unemployment, and yesterday, while getting ready for today's talk, we saw that it stood at 2.9%. We've never seen that low unemployment before. This is a very good integrated or aggregate parameter. of the overall economic performance. When I spoke about the real disposable incomes rise, I must mention that starting from the 1st of January, we will increase the minimum wage by 18%, which is not something that we do frequently. The public debt has been shrinking, which also testifies to the macroeconomic and financial stability. The public debt slumped from 46 to 32 billion USD, and the private external debt also has dwindled. All our companies have been repaying on schedule. It went down from $337 billion to 297. So the repayment is on time, sometimes even ahead of schedule. Well, the aggregate social parameters also, we'll talk a lot about social and welfare matters today, but there is a comprehensive parameter of the life expectancy growth. In 2021, the life expectancy in this country was 70.06. In 2022, 72 and 73.73. And in 2023, we expect the life expectancy at 74 years. So, which is an indicator showing that we are doing fine in terms of our welfare and social policies and economic policies. The other day, you awarded some of the heroes of Russia, and you said that the guys should be spared, but we should continue pressing for 2 years. We have been living amidst the special military operation, so we receive a spate of questions from everybody.
The scale of the attack was something that we were surprised at. David Hadley was a double agent. The Americans did not want him to